I'm John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Sunday, special Sunday, December 15th. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage, and in some cases, start conversations. We don't do prayers or buffalo speeches. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity, and we do step on a few toes along the way. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that is heaped upon us, and we do it all right here from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind you that our audio streams at www.letstalknative.com. We stream live video of the show on our Facebook group page via Facebook Live. Our shows are available as podcasts after our broadcast on your favorite podcast platforms. And we take the video of our show and we post it up on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. So subscribe to our podcast by searching Let's Talk Native with John Kane Podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Let's Talk Native TV. You can follow us on Instagram at Let's Talk Native TV, and Twitter at Let's Talk Native. I am the host of Let's Talk Native, and I'm assisted here in studio by Jake Proud, who is managing our video and our sound. Before I get into the main part of what I want to talk about today, and I'm hoping to get my buddy Sogoyeta to join me later on in the program. But I have to acknowledge today is an anniversary of sorts. It is the anniversary of Sitting Bull's murder. He was murdered on the 15th of December in 1890, and by a bunch of, frankly, a bunch of turncoat tribal police that came to really, they came to murder him. I mean, there was no reason for them to assault him in the wee early morning hours of December 15th. And one of the things I want to share with you, and I have to caution, because I've read this editorial many times on the show, and this is an editorial by L. Frank Baum, who would go on to write The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, be a much praised and lauded American author. But he was the editor of the Saturday Pioneer, which was a newspaper in Dakota Territory during this period of time. And he wrote this editorial. Now, some of the stuff I'm gonna read is really, really wrong. It's obviously it does everything that's so cliche with words like phrases like medicine man and all this other crap. But it gets to a real point. So I'm gonna go ahead and read this editorial because if you haven't heard it before, and even if you have heard parts of it on my show, you probably haven't heard it in its entirety. This is the editorial written by L. Frank Baum. It would actually be published on December 20th, but it was written in response to the death of Sitting Bull. And so here goes. Sitting Bull, most renowned Sioux of modern history, is dead. He was not a chief, but without kingly lineage, he arose from the lowly position to the greatest medicine man of his time by virtue of his shrewdness and daring. He was an Indian with a white man's spirit of hatred and vengeance for those who had wronged him and his. In his days, he saw his son and his tribe gradually driven from their possessions, forced to give up their old hunting grounds, and espouse the hard-working, uncongenial avocations of the whites. And these, his conquerors, were marked in their dealings with his people by selfishness, falsehood, and treachery. What wonder that his wild nature, untamed by years of subjection, would still revolt. What wonder that a fiery rage still burned within his breast, that he should seek every opportunity to obtain vengeance against his natural enemies. The proud spirit of the original owners of these vast prairies, inherited through centuries of fierce and bloody wars for their possession, lingered last in the bosom of Sitting Bull. With his fall, the nobility of the redskin is extinguished, and what few are left are a pack of whining cur who lick the hands that smite them. The whites, by law of conquest, by justice of civilization, are masters of the American continent, and the best safety for the frontier settlements will be secured by the total annihilation of the few remaining Indians. Why not annihilation? Their glory is fled, their spirits broken, their manhood effaced. Better that they die than live the miserable wretches they are. History would forget these latter despicable beings and speak in later ages of the glory of these grand kings of the forest and the plain that Cooper loved to heroism. We cannot honestly regret their extermination, but we at least do justice to the manly characteristics possessed according to the lights and education by the early Redskins of America. So that is how, that is how this guy, who would go on to be this famous writer in American history, would characterize the death of Sitting Bull. You know, praise him. It's almost like a backhanded compliment in many ways. You know, he's one of the guys who gives a different meaning to the only good Indian is a dead Indian, because unlike the original person quoted for that, I think Sheridan was the guy who quoted originally. What he was saying is that the good Indians, that there were good Indians, but they're all dead now. Not that the only way an Indian is good is if he's dead. But he considered Sitting Bull nobility, like a king. And of course, they mischaracterized everything, and again, reducing our lands to merely hunting grounds and all of that stuff. And of course, suggesting that once Sitting Bull was dead, they might as well massacre the rest. As luck would have it, the massacre at Wounded Knee would take place only a couple of weeks after this. So he literally called in praising Sitting Bull as the last nobility of the Redskins, as he put it. He called for the extermination, and that's exactly what they got. They got one of the bloodiest massacres in the history of the United States that would take place, and in fact, it would be considered the bookend, the last of the massacres. I don't even know if that's entirely true, but it is the last one that history records as the last massacre of Native people at the hands of the U.S. military. So, anyway, I want to acknowledge that today was the day that that Sitting Bull was murdered, and again, this editorial suggests that somehow he died fighting. I mean, they went there to kill him, and he died fighting for his life, not seeking vengeance against white people. I mean, it's again, the way history is written, and while I think it's important to reread this this editorial, I don't want people to think that this is in any way, shape, or form the truth of Sitting Bull, his existence, or his relationship to the Lakota. It is a white man's view, but it's also a white man's view that included the calling for our extermination, all of our extermination, not just the Lakota. But anyway, that's why I bring the Al Frank Baum editorial up when I'm talking about the mascot issue, even because he says it was better to kill us, like he was somehow providing mercy to us by killing us. They would preserve for themselves the image that they would later claim for themselves in mascots and all kinds of other stuff. So anyway, hey, look, I was trying to get my buddy James Sogoyeta on the line before we started the show. I'm not going to try to do it until we take a break at the bottom of the hour. So I know James is listening. We'll bring him on at the bottom of the hour. And the reason I want to bring him on is because of both the conversation that he has been having on Facebook and one that I've been having for a while, and so is he, as a matter of fact. But and part of it has to do with what I want to talk about with today's show, and that is the notion that we need to prepare for what's coming. This whole idea that somehow we're going to be the leaders to prevent climate change. And I know Winona Duke and, Jane Fonda and Greta Thunberg and even Sally, all these people are out there. All these celebrities are out there, turning, climate change into an industry almost. But you know what? Nobody did a goddamn thing to stop it 20 years ago and 30 years ago when everybody knew what was coming down the pike. There was no political will. There was no public will to change behavior. So now that we're staring at this stuff and we're seeing what's happening to to the ice of the Arctic and the Antarctic and what's happening with extreme weather, this is here, folks. We're not going to stop it. We need to prepare for it. And you know what? While everybody else, as I said, everybody else is chasing their tails on this thing, and they're traveling all over the world to have these big climate change conferences, pumping out more CO2 into the atmosphere as they do it. Look, people are going to do what they're going to do. But while they're doing that, I don't want to get dragged into that stuff. I've got grandchildren. I've got children and grandchildren, and someday hope to have great-grandchildren. And the legacy that white men and all these rich folks, and the capitalism and the free markets and all this other crap, all that stuff has taken its toll, and nobody's done anything to change it. And so, thinking that you're going to drive electric cars and solve it now, look, by all means, we should do what we should do to stop making the damage worse. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying let's not do anything. But when I start seeing, people saying, well, we need to have this indigenous-led Green New Deal. Look, you know what the Green New Deal is? It's a political talking point. It's a platform issue for some of the Democrats, not all of them, because a good half of the Democrats don't give a rat's ass about climate change. Really, they say they do, but they don't change anything. And the ones who and some are trying to turn it into a platform, but you know what? It ends up just being political rhetoric. So, as a Native person, I mean, look, when I see Native people flying to Madrid, to call down the climate change conference, Tom Goldsmith, look, I get it, but you know what? What did you go there for then? You could have made that same noise from here. Why? Because that's where the cameras are, right? I mean, all these people criticizing Greta Thunberg and others who get in front of the camera, most of it is they're mostly critical because she's getting all this attention. Her message is fine as far as I'm concerned, but you know what? Her anger is for me. I've gone past anger as far as what has happened to our homelands and what's happening to the land of the poor, frankly, because we are the ones who have our environment exploited, while they're building ever taller luxury apartments in Manhattan and Brooklyn, and gentrifying black people out of an area so they can live their high quality of life in these urban environments. We're rapidly seeing more and more extreme weather that we feel the brunt of. So what I'm saying is, no, I'm not going to go march with Winona LaDuke and Sally Field and Jane Fonda. No, I'm not going to do it. I'd rather spend some time back here preparing for what's coming down the pike. But, I'm not even just talking about climate change, because the same thing gets into how much we should involve ourselves in the political process. Yeah, I know. We got a few people who want to run for Congress. We got a couple of Native women who got in. We got a couple of Native men on the GOP side who've been congressmen for several years. And we're supposed to think that they're going to solve the problems? They're going to represent our concern to them? No, they change sides. They're part of the ruling class now. And you know what? Most of these people weren't embedded in our communities anyway. They had already disenfranchised themselves from their people long before they were able to run for Congress. But then we get sucked into voting for in all of this stuff. Do I think Donald Trump is one of the worst human beings to ever sit in the White House? Sure. I don't know that he's the worst president, but he's one of the worst human beings. And look, every possible character flaw you could expect in a rich white man, he has them all. So I'm not singing Donald Trump's praises, but you know what? He's exactly what the Americans deserve. That's what they wanted. That's why they elected him. Yeah, I know we can get into the whole debate. Well, yeah, but Hillary Clinton got more votes. I don't care. That's your system. That's a system that you guys support. And don't expect me to encourage other Native people to support that system. And I'm not even just talking about on the U.S. side. Same on the Canadian side. Getting involved in that in that terrible system up there, That's as bad as what exists in the United States. Same with, Great Britain and the mess that they're going through. Look, I'm paying attention to it. I observe it. Why? Because, again, we have to prepare ourselves for this stuff. This is what's coming down the pike. We are affected by what they're doing, but we can't change what they're doing. White people control that politics. And the rich, mostly rich white people. So it doesn't matter if we vote, and sure doesn't matter if we pray. Right? They use their church to justify all of this stuff too. We, at some point, better prepare for climate change. We better prepare for this political unraveling, this social unrest, these race wars. I mean, look, the people shooting each other in their schools and their synagogues and everything else. I mean, Walmart, where the hell they're going to shoot next? And that's just a few white men who really, most of them are too gutless to do anything anyway. But when a few of them lose their minds, that's what they do. They go shoot up a school or something. But we need to be prepared for it. And we should be untangling ourselves. I talk about this all the time about what decolonization really means. It doesn't mean pray for them. It doesn't mean go vote, vote in their system. It doesn't mean let's run for office in their system. We need to take care of some stuff at home. Because when I hear, Winona LaDuke saying, well, the Green New Deal was an indigenous-led effort, I don't know if that's even true. But regardless of, where anybody came up with these planks of their platform, it's theirs now. And they're going to play politics with it. It's what they always do. And some people try to get famous out of this stuff. And not just famous, they also try to get wealthy. They find ways to market this stuff. Not just with their $20,000 speaking engagements and their free travel all over the world so they can be in front of every camera that sits in all these, these elite spaces, whether it's Hawaii or New Zealand or Europe or wherever they're going to go next. And all the while, they are increasing their brand, right? They're gaining value to their own brand. That's what they do. All of them. And I know people say, yeah, but Winona, she's growing hemp back home. Well, yeah, maybe she is. Yeah, maybe she is. But we need to look, when you got to pay somebody $10,000 just to come speak to your people, that's somebody who's cashing in as far as I'm concerned. But again, it's not about any of those individuals. It's about what we do in our communities. And I'll tell you, we've got to fight each other over having an ag program. Even in Seneca Nation, it's like a battle every week, to keep an ag program, not just existing, but, I mean, to make it of any value, we need to grow our agriculture. We need to get more involved in food production. It's not enough to grow a few acres of corn. If we want to be serious about preparing for climate change, we better understand what the climate is. We better understand what the climate, how it affects the food that we produce. There's a whole lot that we could do to insulate ourselves from what these madmen are doing to the rest of the world. And I don't mean I'm not talking about R24 insulation. I mean creating a buffer, creating some protection. I've talked about what they call transition towns or what I call sustainable villages. There is more that we could do as community members. I mean, look, you listen to some of these climate scientists, and they say, look, the best thing you could do is stop consuming at the level they're consuming, and stop consuming the goods that have to travel from China. Not because I begrudge the Chinese, but if you want to do something that's better for the environment, then buy local. And I don't mean just because it's good for the economy, which of course it is, your local economy. Look, most of us spend the majority of our lives within a few miles of where we live. Honestly. I mean, look, some of us travel. But most of us don't travel very far. And when we do travel outside that few little miles, it's because we have to go buy something that's not available close by. And that may be food, it might be, stuff that we just don't produce. We don't do enough to make sure that we provide as many of the essentials close to home. That's a part of what I'm talking about when I talk about preparing ourselves. And as far as the politics go, look, things are getting ugly in the United States, folks. I don't know if you noticed or not, but I mean the rift, the animosity, the vitriol that goes back and forth between the right and the left, between the white and the white and the black, or the white and everybody else of color. And at the same time, almost 60% of the U.S. budget is still going into growing its military. And it's not defense. Let's not call it defense, because it isn't about defense. It's military. It's aggression. It's offense. I mean, the stuff that is being spent. I mean, when you talk about the billions and billions and billions of dollars, and then somebody wants me to get excited because Donald Trump puts $1.5 million to the justice, or they spend it in U.S. prosecutors' offices because he's going to help us with missing and murdered Indigenous women. Give me a freaking break. That's a joke. It's not just an insult because the number's so small, but if you get into the details, it's probably more about stripping away our power to address these issues ourselves, which is all the things that we need to do. We need to take not just more control, but more responsibility for our communities. Look, I saw all these posts this week about drug houses and that kind of stuff. Well, let's do something about it. Don't tell me you're going to pray for the community. Give me a freaking break. You're going to pray away drug houses? How's that worked out with the alcohol problem for the last 200 years that was imposed by white people on our territories? And you think you're going to call the cops? You don't think the local police are content with some of the drugs being consumed and dealt with here, so it's not in their communities? They don't care what happens here. Our community is what they drive through. And occasionally harass us a little bit, but that's what they're interested in. They're not that interested in trying to solve whether it's missing and murdered Indigenous women or whether it's the drug issue. So stop thinking that they're going to do that. They aren't. This should be our responsibility. Yeah, I posted a comment on Facebook this week, and I said, look, we could ask those white folks in Washington and Ottawa to solve our problems for us. But did we forget that they caused them? I mean, when are we going to start working community to community? And I know that's one of the issues that Sogoyeta and I talked about. But we rarely ever get past the talking stages of these things. These are exactly the issues that we need to start addressing. And you know what? Here's the thing about the missing and murdered Indigenous women issues. At the foundation of that problem, of substance abuse problems, many of our own social degradation issues on our territory are tied to the lack of our own prospects for the future. I mean, some of our territories. I mean, look, we live here in Western New York, and we're not like in the middle of no man's land. We're not separated from the rest of the world the way some native territories are. I mean, literally, some of them are separated. And so when you grow up in these communities, not only are you growing up in abject poverty, but you're growing up in an atmosphere or an environment where you can't see, well, what are the prospects for my future? What am I going to do with the rest of my life? And there's no shame in herding cattle or farming or any of that stuff. And I don't want to suggest for a second that that's a terrible thing to do. But in the world that we live in, and we're exposed to so much, if we don't see opportunities in our own community to grow intellectually, not just financially, but by coming up with a definition of success that can be inspiring to us. Look, the thing about human beings, and this is human nature, we are not just content to live a miserable life, even though the Bible tells us, right? The Bible tells us, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. That's literally scripture telling you to, just take it. Just suck it up. Yeah, your life is miserable, but when you die, you're going to inherit the earth. I don't know what the hell you're going to do with it then. But I mean, that's literally biblical scripture telling you to don't try to change. Stay humble. Stay humble. Stay in servitude, because in the afterlife you're gonna live better. You know what I say to that? Bullshit. We don't deserve to stay in live under oppression, and we now have accepted a place where we expect our kids to live in that environment. We need to change that. So when I talk about preparing for the future and preparing against climate change, I'm saying we need to prepare for all of it. We need to start taking responsibility for the lives that our kids are going to live, that our grandkids are going to live. Because if we don't do it, nobody else is going to care. Nobody else is going to care. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour, so I'm gonna go to break. I'm gonna try to get my buddy Sogoyeta on the line, and we'll come back and we'll beat up the subject a little bit more. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native.
Don't cry, I really didn't mean it. In my own way, we were playing a game. It goes up and down, around and around, running each other into the ground. You say you're leaving, I say don't go away. Pieces of you, pieces of me. Pieces of you, pieces of me. Yeah. Pieces of you, pieces of me. Shattered like a broken dream, and I just end up calling your name. Pieces of you, pieces of me. Tattered, hanging by a string. I just end up calling your name. Stay a little longer. Don't walk out of that door. Mi amor, stay a little longer. I don't want this anymore. No more, no And I hear the howling wind and the cold chills my bones. But there ain't nothing like the feel of being all alone.
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Hey, before we get back into it, let me go ahead and thank my sponsors. Let's Talk Native is sponsored by Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, some of the good folks at Grand River Enterprises and Native Wholesale Supply, and a few others. Look, I reached out. I had to offer my thanks again to Harry Wallace and a few others who on occasion when I'm in a jam, these guys are the ones who step up, and I appreciate the support that I get from Shaw Bay and VJ and Steve from New York and Harry and others. So my good buddy Ed Schindler as well. So these are the guys who help us do what we do here, and without their support, we couldn't do this show. And what we try to do here, and I have to reiterate it. We're not trying to provide all of the answers, but before you can even start coming up with solutions, you have to acknowledge the problem. And one of the problems that I keep trying to acknowledge here is that we're getting sucked into this vortex of BS by trying to think that we're going to solve the problem that white men have created with climate change. We're not going to solve it. So we have to figure out how to survive it, how to prepare ourselves for it. So that's what we need to do. Look, one other thing I wanted to mention, the Dakota 38 ride, the ride that goes to Mankato, Minnesota each year to commemorate the largest mass execution in the history of the United States. There are guys that are out there in the cold today, making their trip to Mankato, Minnesota. That ride has begun. I've shown the film, the Dakota 38, in New York, and we've screened that film a few times. If you get a chance, you can look it up. You can find it online. But it's kind of an incredible thing. Not just the ride, but the story and the truth behind Abraham Lincoln signing the execution order for 38 Dakota to be hung in Mankato, Minnesota. And that hanging would take place on December 26th, the day after Christmas in 1862, a week before Abraham Lincoln would sign the Emancipation Proclamation. So, but there are a bunch of guys, and look, I saw a great picture. They were actually carrying the Unity flag behind them. So, warrior flag, what you want to call it. And it was great to see that hoisted up as these guys were riding on horseback. All right, let me see if I can get my buddy James Gray, Sogayeta. James, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Okay, good. All right, we're connected. I tried to call you before the show started, but I don't know. You always tweak the time just a little bit. You wait until I get started before you decide to. I don't know.
Yeah, I said to myself, well, I'm going to listen to his show a bit anyways. He'll probably get a hold of me somehow.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually wearing one of your Warrior Wear shirts for the show. I don't know if you saw the video, but I've got, let me show you my shoulder here. For the camera, there's the Warrior Wear, and we'll pull up your banner that I helped put together for you, so that people can see how to get a hold of you. Maybe we'll Jake, go ahead and narrow that film right there on the banner. You can take me off screen and get it right on that just for a second, if you would. There, make sure you got James's email address. All right. So, as we're talking, people can see what I want to give you the promo. I want to give you give you the boost here while we're on the show.
Yeah, it was nice. I seen that on there. I said, man, he puts it on, and he says, and I forget to call and give him a call back and get on myself.
All right, well, we got you now. Well, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you join me was because you and I are having similar conversations with similar audiences, frankly. I know part of your response, and it's not that you and I are necessarily trying to dog Winona LaDuke, but it's really this whole notion that that somehow we have to plug ourselves into their political system, because this Green New Deal, and look, they want to attribute it to a native-led movement. Look, where were all these people when we were trying to stop the pipelines in Standing Rock? Yeah, a few celebrities came up and posed for the cameras and that kind of stuff. But when I see all this idea of this being turned into a Democratic Party political platform, look, let them run with it. But as far as I'm concerned, we need to concentrate on the stuff that we need to do. And so I wanted to get some of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, well, that's the main reason I wrote what I wrote, and I presented it to a lot of different sites, and I might have presented it too many sites. Anyways, I'm in your jail cell on Facebook right now.
Well, I left your message on the side of the cell bars.
Yeah, I've seen it. You were pretty much laughing at me.
Yeah, well, well, you have to remember, James, I went to a real jail cell before, so this Facebook jail stuff, that's fine with me. That's like a break.
Yeah, and they've been trying to get me for a long time in one of those cells too. For the activism we've done all our lives.
I think I hid you out once.
Oh yeah, you did, right?
Yeah. No, you and I got some history here.
we kind of look at that, and it's kind of funny here. I passed through your territory, and I had to hide out for a little bit.
Yeah. I had to sneak you around just so you didn't have to share that jail cell. All right, that's another story altogether. But no, I appreciate the post that you put up, because again, sometimes I got to tell you, and I know you feel the same way. It feels like we are like lone voices out there, and I see our people getting sucked into this stuff. I mean, between people trying to get us to vote or to pray or to endorse some candidate or a movement. Look, anything anybody wants to do that's pro environment, I support them, but I'm not going to put my effort, look, you and I aren't getting any younger. We only have so much effort to put into something at this stage of the game. So as far as I'm concerned, we need to put our effort where it's going to produce the most. And I think preparing ourselves for climate change, I think preparing ourselves for the social unrest that is happening, not in the U.S. and Canada and globally. Look what's happening in South America, the assault on indigenous people. So all these people want to talk about, indigenous-led efforts. Well, where the hell are all the people stepping up for Evo Morales? Where are all the people stepping up for, for the Chavistas in Venezuela or the indigenous people in Brazil? I mean, the people who are fighting in Chile and in Ecuador. No, our people, we have gotten is involved in all of their machinations as much as anybody. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard to pull people back.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the people they're killing down there, because of Morales, and the majority support he has with the native people in those countries. And, the influence that the U.S. and Canada and Europe has on everybody down there, just to keep the economy going for themselves, to see what they can take.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with Evo Morales had as much to do with lithium mining as it did with anything else. I mean,
yeah,
and so you look at all of this stuff, they'd like to say, well, this is because we're against socialism. That's all crap, too, because the so-called democracies that they claim to be supporting are anything but. Frankly, the U.S. doesn't have one. Canada doesn't have one. And I'm not even saying democracy is a great system. If it was so great, you'd think one would exist in these one of these big countries, and it doesn't. Look at the mess in England. It's all just crap. And so when they say that they're waging war against socialism, or communism or the Red Scare or whatever else, look, the only thing they're waging war against is indigenous people in every one of these circumstances.
Yep. Yeah, and living here, I live so close to their so-called border, they say, in which our people believe is over our heads, doesn't belong in our nation or country, And I keep going through that. A couple of times I went to court and I had to speak, and they asked me where I live. I told them I live in Kanien'kehá:ka territory, or what they call Mohawk territory. And yeah, they say, oh yeah, which side, the U.S. side or the Canadian side? And I said, it's
our side.
Territory. Yeah, it's our side, and they get confused. I even had a judge speaking to me and saying, oh, I know you've owned all this land here, and he was leaning over to me talking. And then finally he interrupted the lawyer, telling him to stop asking me those questions now that I've answered them. And in fact, that was the lawyer I was supporting his client on it.
Well, and the question comes down is, what's the relevance of the question? I mean, what difference does it make if they drew an arbitrary line in the sand someplace? What difference if you live in on our community, just because they claim there's a line there, does it matter which side? I mean, so all of it is just irrelevant, and that's the game that they try to suck us into. They try to get us. I mean, look, and I even saw some of the debate that you were having on Facebook, and people want to get into, then what about your name, James? Well, look, I don't like I said. Whether I call you by your Kanien'kehá:ka name, Sogayeta, and you call me Gargillo, or whether I call you James and you call me John, it doesn't change who we are. But if you're going to call me a Canadian or an American, now we got an issue, because those labels that we carry, the names that we call ourselves or each other, I mean, whether it's a nickname or whether it's a given name, whether it's a longhouse name or wherever it comes from, we have half the time we abridge our native names. How many people do you know will shorten their native name just as a matter of we just call each other that, right?
Right.
We take a couple of syllables off, and it's not because we're disrespecting the name. I mean, but so when I hear people start to play that game, it's like, look, we're playing the wrong game here. We should be more concerned about whether we are being regarded and counted not as, and look, I know the whole birth certificate argument people want to get into too, but really, are you a Canadian or are you a U.S. citizen? And if you're
Yeah.
not, how many people are willing to actually say that? And
Right,
and
right.
and whether and then when somebody says, well, do you have documentation that you used to? I don't need to have a white man's piece of paper saying that. I say it all the time here. That
Yeah.
my word is what my word is, not whether I put it on somebody's on some paper that they contaminated the earth producing from trees. I mean, it's absurd what some people will turn into the argument.
Yeah. And what I got into was the Winona thing she put on with
Amy Goodman and Democracy Now,
Amy
right?
Goodman. Yeah. Where she started talking and they talk about the Green New Deal. And I know there's this guy named Iron Eyes and
Chase, yeah.
Yeah, I keep forgetting his name, and he's running for Congress and whatever.
Well, she
and
ran as the vice president in the Green Party once. I mean, so these guys have already jumped into that system.
Right. So I just, and I have great respect for Winona. She does a lot of things, but is she doing it for the people or is she doing it for herself? It's some of the things you got to ask. And why are they running in these elections? I have the same conversation you have with everybody. Why are you running in an election to become voted in by the United States or Canada to do their bidding? And I wonder.
Well, and even the ones who claim, like I said, when I hear Deborah Hallen or Sharice David or this Cole from Oklahoma or whatever else claiming, oh, we're gonna push for federal legislation to address this problem for Native people. We don't need we don't need that top down approach to the issues that are local to us. We need them to get out of our business, not plug them farther into our business. So when I hear these people try to create a national debate over the death of women in our communities or a pipeline that goes through our territory, no, we should have say. And we should have local say. And it's the same thing I always say. What we need to do is support each other in each one of our struggles. So if there's a pipeline at Standing Rock, we go there. We support the Lakota that are fighting it there. We don't go there and figure out which side to stand on. If we're going to go there, we side with our brothers and sisters that are there.
Yeah,
but, this is when it gets confusing.
It's very hard when you go to somewhere. I went to Standing Rock. My boys were in Standing Rock, and I went out there for probably a week time. I was there, and it was very hard because the way they stand up, they all pray for peace. And what is peace going to do for you? You had the majority of people there to start arresting the policemen that were out there.
They had as many as 10,000 people there at one point. You can't tell me if you put 10,000 people on the front line against whatever the Morton County sheriffs or their paid mercenaries, we could have overwhelmed them. I mean, I say the same thing. Even I got to tell you, even going back to Gunyonge. I mean, when I think about what took place up in or not Gunyonge, I mean Oka, Ganazadage. To me, if we wanted to get those guys out of the treatment center, we should have showed up with about 100,000 people and walked in there and walked them out of there. Overwhelmed them. They weren't going to throw. I mean, how much military presence do we really think Canada was going to put there? But again, we are afraid to take that next step. I'm not saying we had to kill anybody. I'm not saying we had to fire a shot. We could have overwhelmed them with people. But to get our people, I mean, everybody had no problem showing up to sit there and eat food at Standing Rock. But how many of them really wanted to get involved in going to the front lines?
Yeah.
And that's the point. At some point, and I'm not saying we all have to show up at every place. Most of these things most of the issues that we all face, we can take a position right within our own home territories to support them.
Yeah, and the thing is, there's a lot of people out there that feel the same way we feel and speak about it, but yet they're confused because of all these laws that are put on them, And I keep trying to, when I talk to someone, I keep trying to explain, be who you are. You're not a Canadian. You're not an American. In our language, we're Ungwahungwe. And in their languages, they have a word that means the same thing as us, and that's who they are, and that's who they should be,
Yeah, but
But
then
then
our
they,
people get intimidated. I mean, how many times have you heard somebody give some line of BS about the Patriot Act? Well, you got to be careful. If you go down on the throughway, you're going to find yourself in a jail cell in Guantanamo Bay. I've always
yeah,
wanted to go to Cuba. I'm not
yeah,
saying that's the way I wanted to go there, but we all of a sudden everybody gets cold feet when they think
right,
that that's something, or you're going to get charged. Look, the most foolish things to do. I mean, look, Red Fawn is the one who's in serving the most time because she got suckered in by a federal informant to carry his gun, and that's what she's in jail for. She got set up.
right,
But
right,
but again, we're not thinking this stuff through. The
yeah,
more that we could do with massive amounts of people, either in our individual territories or when there really is a front line to go to, then by all means go. But
yeah,
when our people show up at these things only to I mean, when I think about people who went there to have babies, for instance,
hmm
I mean, what the hell would a community, with this temporary community built up out of Standing Rock? Why would you want to put that burden on them? So just so you can claim your child was born at Standing Rock? That's
right,
pathetic. I mean, that's just.
right,
I mean, that makes me crazy.
yeah, yeah. I've had some discussions with some political people in Canada who are close to Trudeau. Actually, he's probably his right hand man. And I've spoken to him about these things, and I've spoken to him about the land. Like in BC, where the people in Blue River, Cunnahus Freedom, that are blocking the pipeline there. You know, I spoke to him. I said, that land that's there, that belongs to me. I said, as much as it belongs to them. The only problem is I'm here protecting my land for my generations who are coming, but that's my land too out there. And you can't claim it. You can't put anything on there. Trudeau can't make all these promises he makes to, and I have to say it, he makes it to our women, and our women fall graciously over him, and they put him back in office again. But it
Yeah,
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's Trudeau or anybody else that's going to go in office. We fight the same situation when everybody goes in office,
yeah.
whether it's Trump or whether it was Clinton.
Or
All of
Harper
them,
or Trudeau. Yeah, it didn't
right,
matter. Yeah,
right. All of them have that dirty closets with them.
yeah.
What they carry against our people, and our people don't understand that.
I mean,
That
look at the quotes from Trudeau's dad, for crying out loud. I mean, he basically, tried to minimize our existence, because again, talking about, the act of genocide, and then after the fact saying, well, because our genocide was successful against you, you can no longer claim to be who you are. I mean, that's literally. I mean, if you break down what Pierre Trudeau was saying, well, if you don't speak your language, you guys tried to kill our language, for crying out loud. If you
right,
don't,
right.
if you don't live this way or live that way, then you can't claim to be Native anymore. Like, who the
Yeah,
freak are you to say that?
right. I had the same discussion when I was in Ottawa about 2 weeks ago, and a guy came and he was talking to me while I was selling my shirts.
Hmm.
And he came over and he talked to me, and he talked to me about the cultural genocide. And I says, "What do you mean cultural genocide? You're saying this Sinclair put in a thing about cultural genocide. It was totally genocide. It wasn't no cultural genocide in the first place." I said, "Ever since your people stepped on and tried to form their governments here out of England, you know, colonies, which the United States and Canada still are under England," I said, "it was genocide since that point." I said, "They tried to kill our people from that point. They tried to give us
No, they did kill
small,
our people. I mean, they
right,
tried to kill all our people, but they didn't get
and
that far.
they
Yeah,
give us they
yeah,
give us smallpox blankets, whatever they did, and then they took our children to school. They took them and cut their hairs and tried to make them the white people.
They
It was
also
so
subjected them to conditions that where mortality rate was over 50% in many of these schools because of
right.
tuberculosis and various other
Yeah,
diseases. So
and
no,
you,
there was
and
all
you
kinds of things that they did.
you look at murder and missing women. That started from the beginning, also. And the kids that were taken to all these residential schools who died there, or who died running away from there.
Yep.
All the same thing happened, and it was sponsored by the government. sponsored by the government
Well,
of the
and I'll tell
United
you,
States.
at least when these women got involved in the commission on missing and murdered Indigenous women, they didn't soft pedal. They called it what it was. They called it genocide, and
Right.
they didn't stick cultural in front of it, or they didn't. I hear people say paper genocide and cultural genocide, or and they put these words in front of it like to minimize the effects of what genocide really is. And
Yep.
and they all want to hedge. So and I see this internationally too. When you'll get some of these bureaucrats at the UN or whatever else say, well, we don't really know if that really means and fits the definition of genocide. The definitions are pretty clear. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to determine whether you create the conditions to make a people cease to exist or not. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's the main theme of genocide is, are you creating the conditions that a people will cease to exist as a distinct people? It doesn't necessarily mean they kill us all, but you kill enough of us. I mean, the other thing that it was also trending through Facebook this week was the sterilization programs and how many of our women were duped. And this is coming out of 1970. So people think this is ancient history. No, it's not. I mean, you and I grew up in the 70s. I mean, so when I start thinking about, a policy where you convince women that they have to do this, for a variety of reasons, whether first you convince them it's in their best interest for health, and of course, then you dangle certain benefits in front of them. There's by some estimates, 25% of child age or child rearing age women were sterilized, for a decade and a half after the 70s through the Indian Health Services, and that's not even counting what had taken place at the residential schools running up to that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's incredible.
There's so much problems, that happens not only way back then, but today. Not only the sterilization, but the taking of Native children when they're born in the hospitals. I have friends in Winnipeg who went through the same thing, where they were taking a Native baby away from a young girl because they said she had a drug problem.
Yeah, I mean, it still goes on today. And in fact, one of the ways they get around the Indian Child Welfare Act, which was also this weak attempt at the federal government to solve a problem they created, was getting Native kids from the Canadian side of this imaginary line, and putting them into the hands of Americans on the American side of that imaginary line. It's they find all these ways around this stuff, and the reason for bringing all this stuff up, this isn't about crying victim. This is about saying we better consider this stuff as we're trying to partner with these people and being a part of that system. So whether you want to run for their offices, you want to be a part of that Congress that has authorized this crap, you want to be a part of that system, or do we need to separate from it? And that's what it all comes down to, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and the part of it is they make all these things like Trump did. He put in $1 million or whatever into this
missing and murdered Indigenous women, and it's all BS. Literally, it's $1.5 million that he was going to have to spread out over 11 U.S. attorneys' offices. That ends up being only a little over $100,000 per office. That's not going to solve any problems. That's just more money for them to waste at the U.S. attorney's office.
Yeah, and that's the money they give to go out to lunch to eat, to discuss some things different than what they're really discussing.
Yeah, put a better salad bar in their offices or something. Yeah,
and Trudeau does the same thing in Canada.
Our people get sucked into it, and they say, "Oh, look, Trump did something great. Isn't that great?" Well, or I listen to something. Well, at least he did something. No, my buddy Ed always says, if you have to begin a sentence with "at least," you might just well not even say the rest of the conversation.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's ridiculous what they do. It's like you and I, when we talk about these things and we talk about the murdered missing women, and started to put something together with some people out west in Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, individuals who are trying to do something, and it's very hard for them to get together to do these things. It's very hard for me to be out there to talk with them. It's very hard for them to be here, so we said, well, we're going to do it where we're going to put it on territories where our own people are going to start watching over these things and start working at it, and we know that it's the police do help. There are people who do help, but there are police who are just in there just to do the same thing
Well, and
they've
there's no
done all their
question.
life.
I mean, look, much of, 70% of the domestic violence that Native women experience is at the hands of white people. So
Yep.
we have to work on the relationship with with non-Native law enforcement. But as in terms of how we protect our people, we need to take more control of that. But again, one of the problems is, and every time we have an issue like this that we try to address, what we find ourselves in is trying to create a system for doing it, and we end up following one of their processes. Well, we look for grant funding, and then we got to figure out, okay, well, we have to abide by these conditions, and we have to file taxes, and we have to do. So we end up creating the same bureaucracy that causes a lot of these problems, even as we're trying to solve the problem. We don't take enough of the initiative completely out of that system and say, let's provide a native solution, a Seneca solution, an Undawaga solution, a Gunjagahaga solution, a Lakota solution, a Dene solution. We look for something, and we ultimately end up looking to the United States or Canada to be this overarching thing that binds us together, and it doesn't. Only that we have the same problems.
Yeah.
So,
And you look at it. You look at it even in the school system. There was a school in the Dakotas, and a white people set up the school system, and they used the Indian kids to raise money for the school, and they were making $50 million a year for their own little school system. And sure, they took care of Indian kids that were going there, but the process doesn't start there, you know. And,
we fall into the wrong system when we're trying to come up with solutions, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we should take a white kid and say, this white kid is suffering so much that we got to raise money for him and do.
We got to indoctrinate them, yeah.
Right.
Hey, Jake, go ahead and put up James's banner one more time. We're about out of time, but again, James, I'm giving you your pitch here. So go ahead and talk about your warrior wear line.
Yeah, well, the warrior wear, I've done that for a long time, and recently I just started putting it back in place and trying to do some things, and I'm making a little bit of progress here and there. You know, not as big as a lot of people. I see a lot of people who are portraying they have native wear and everything, and they got tons of money behind them. Well, just like everything else, we're starting with not enough money behind us to do stuff, you know. But it's starting to come out. You know, it's lasting. I have different art that I do. I have the shirt that you had done for murdered and missing women.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, and we're just trying to grow with that. You know, we're doing it slowly, and hopefully we're going to continue. And at one point, I'll be able to do a lot of different things, I hope, with it and contribute back. You know, and a lot of the shirts that I'm selling, I want to contribute back to the murdered and missing women, and it's not just for us. There's a lot of other people. You know, I have contacts throughout so-called Canada and so-called United States that are fighting the murdered and missing women thing. You know, and so
and this is a global phenomenon. So when you look at the most vulnerable people throughout the world, whether you're talking about South America, Africa, Asia, you know, the women who are on the lowest end of the economic scale are the ones who get victimized by through all of this. So, but well, James, I want to thank you, Sogoyeta. I want to thank you for joining me on the program. We'll get you back on next time. We'll try at the beginning of the show instead of halfway through. And but I thank you for joining me, and we'll talk soon.
Maybe I'll be in a Facebook jail by that time.
Yeah, maybe by then. But well, I'm keeping you there anyway, so you might be in Facebook jail, but we snuck you through the bars for tonight anyway.
All right. Now.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Dave tonight, and my thanks to Sogoyeta for joining me tonight. And we'll be back here on Tuesday. And then I'm off to New York for Thursday. So I'll look forward to getting back to New York after a week off. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. Yahweh.